When we think about revolution, we think, oh, we'll take the state, we'll take power, and after that we'll change society. But when you take the state, you put yourself into a form of organization that is the ruling form of organization. It's the capitalist form of organization. And from there, it is impossible to make the social changes that you want to make. And yeah, I mean, if we think of experience, if we think of what happened in Russia or the Soviet Union, if we think of China, it's very clear that that was a disaster. To engage in politics, for me, means really to push, to try and think about how we organize socially to change the world, to break the rule of money. We now live in a world that is dominated by money, dominated by capital. We know that that system of organization is pushing us quite possibly towards extinction of the human race. So it becomes absolutely crucial to break that system. And for me, politics means that. How do we engage socially in a way that pushes against the rule of money? It doesn't mean politics in the sense of state politics. No, it's clearly a rejection of state politics. I mean, the Zapatistas very explicitly say, no, we won't. There were negotiations at the very beginning, but basically, no, they're saying we are creating our own society. We are creating our own system of education, our own system of healthcare, our own system of justice, our own system of administration. And they've been doing that for more than 30 years now, free of the state. We see that many, many people try to break with the logic of capital in some sort of way. Lots of people say, well, when I finish school or when I finish university, I don't want to just sell my life to capital. I want to be able to do something that makes sense, that has a different logic, that has a different motivation behind it. And sometimes these movements are just very small. It can be just a few friends getting together and saying, well, you know, we want to develop critical journalism, for example. No. Or it can be very big, like the Zapatista movement or the Kurdish freedom movement, saying, no, we're going to go in a different direction with a different logic. And this is what I think of as being cracks in the cracks in the logic of capital. Okay? And that if we think about it, all of us, if we just think for a moment, within 5 minutes, I'm sure we can think of 10 different cracks. No? And these are always contradictory, but I think that is the only way we can think about really transforming society, is to say, no, we're going to recognize the cracks that already exist because they're everywhere. We're going to create more cracks. We're going to make them bigger. We're going to try and think of how we get them to flow together. No? Yeah. That is, if we don't think of revolution in terms of seizing the state, then that is really the only way to do it. So the cracks then are really a question of trying to do things according to a different logic. And that can imply all sorts of things. But there is one tradition in the whole anti-capitalist movement that goes way back. Obviously, the most obvious example is the Paris Commune of 1871. But what you get in any movement of rebellion is some sort of communal organization. And a communal organization, and also it's what we do among friends, if you say. I mean, pretty often as students, if you say, well, let's go out and have a meal together, and where are we going to go? And people have different opinions, but you come to some sort of agreement in the end. It's a kind of, like, a commune, as I understand it, is really a form of coming together in which we express our different opinions and we think about how to overcome those differences or reach some sort of decision. No? So it's a process of asking and debating, whereas the state is completely different. The state is a process of telling. It's a process of commanding. It's a process of saying, you will do that. No? And if you don't, we will exercise violence against you. So the state, as a form of organization, is inherently violent. Whereas a commune is a question of coming together, not because we agree, we may have disagreements, but we say, well, we're going to talk about those disagreements. No? And of course, that's, for me, is a very important part of what the Kurdish movement is doing, as I understand it. And Rojava is the example, I suppose, that we know best in Mexico, but in the movement as a whole. And it's also the process, what the Zapatistas are doing. Oh, I think Rojava is, I think of it as a wonderful crack. But I think all cracks they're never pure cracks. They've always got their contradictions. They always have their practical problems. And I think, from what I mean, one of the wonderful things, and one thing that I respect very much about the Kurdish movement, is the willingness to develop criticisms within the movement. I mean, I think of Rojava, but wonderful, but also I think, well, some of the times it seems that the assemblies are not working as well as one would want. You know, there are perhaps not as many people involved as one would want. The organization of the economy is still very contradictory. The movement against ecocide is contradictory as well, because the whole economy depends on the production of oil as well. So you have to try and work, I think through those contradictions or work from those contradictions. And in that sense, I have enormous admiration for the Kurdish movement and the Rojava movement, because I understand that that's what they're trying to do. So yes, Rojava is a super crack. I think the question of Kurdish identity, or the question of identity in general, is, for me, very important and very contradictory, in the sense that in the case of the Kurdish people, I mean, from what I have learned, and obviously the long period of oppression, the lack of recognition of the specificity of Kurds, the oppression of the Kurdish language and culture, then clearly the struggle against that is absolutely important. I don't like the term identity, because identity for me means a closure. No? So you could say, well, yes, we're going to struggle for recognition of Kurdish identity, and then we'll be happy. And I don't think that will work. I think you have to think not just we are Kurds, but we are Kurds and more than that. We are Kurds and we want to change the world. There is a tension there, because if you think of it just in terms of establishing the rights to Kurdish identity, then there's a danger that it stops there. No? And that would be very sad, because what for me, and I think for many, many, many people, is very exciting, is that the Kurdish movement is a movement to transform the world. The same in the case of the Zapatistas. The Zapatistas it's an indigenous movement. It's a movement almost 100% indigenous. And of course, part of that movement has been a movement for indigenous rights and the rights of indigenous people and of their languages. But the exciting thing about the Zapatistas is they have said at the beginning, from the beginning, which also I think Öcalan is saying, is we're not just a movement for indigenous rights, we want to transform the world. And that's kind of an overflowing from identity. And that seems to me absolutely crucial, because if you just think of it in terms of identity, then you're losing the most exciting part of the movement. There are for me, two great lights shining in the dark. One is the Zapatista movement. The other is the Kurdish freedom movement. And what is special about them? I want to say, okay, here we're in the middle of practical negotiations. We're talking about, there's going to be discussion of the Irish experience, the Catalan experience, the Bask experience, etc. Great. But let's not forget that the Kurdish movement is something very special. It's not the same as the Catalan movement. It's not the same as the Bask movement. It's not the same as the Irish nationalist movement, because it's really thinking about how we can reorganize society, how we can transform society on a different basis. And let's not lose sight of that when we're talking about the practicalities of the present situation.